Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs. Will the Minister update the House on the government's reforms of the 457 visa class and how these changes are helping to secure jobs for Australian workers? Why is it important to support Australian jobs and Australian skills?
The Minister for Citizenship.
Well, can I thank the member for Dunkley for his question and his interest in this area. Mr Speaker, as members would be aware that last year the government announced significant changes to the 457 visa class in order to put Australian workers first when it comes to Australian jobs. And so, for example, we've already reduced the number of eligible occupations on the skills shortage list from 651 down to 461 to ensure that overseas workers are only brought in when there's genuine skills needs. We're about to introduce new rules for how jobs must be advertised so that Aussies get the first chance at those jobs. And further, we're investing in the Skilling Australian Fund, which will generate about 300,000 apprentices and traineeships going towards areas where there are skills shortages today. And, Mr Speaker, I can report that these things are already having an impact, because the most recent data shows that the number of 457s granted last year was only 70,000, and that's almost half the number that was granted compared to the last year of the Labor governments. And this is particularly impressive, Mr Speaker, because while we'd only granted half the number of 457s, we'd massively grown the economy and the number of jobs, as we've heard from by the Prime Minister and Treasurer. And equally, the number of people on welfare had also shrunk to its lowest levels in 25 years. So we've seen it's a great trifecta of more jobs, fewer people on welfare, and consequently fewer overseas workers needing to come into the country to fulfil those unskilled, to fulfil those positions. That's a great trifecta for Australian workers, Mr Speaker. And it's interesting to contrast that with the Labor years, and you go through, because whereas we created the positive trifecta of more jobs, more Aussies in those jobs and fewer overseas workers coming into the country, the exact opposite occurred under the Labor government. So let's go through each one. You start with the job creation. Well, believe it or not, in the last year of the Labor government, the jobs actually declined, actually went backwards by over 17,000 people. You look at the welfare queues. The welfare queues increased by 250,000 people under the previous Labor governments. And then, while that's happening, how many 457s came in? A record number of 130,000 457s came in. More people on welfare, more overseas workers coming in to take the jobs, and fewer Aussies taking those jobs. And guess who was in charge of that program? None other than the Leader of the Opposition.